Today, we'll be focusing on financing land development projects. This is a crucial aspect of real estate and infrastructure development, as securing the right funding is essential to turning land from a raw asset into a developed and usable property. Throughout this discussion, we'll explore the various ways developers can obtain financing, the challenges they may face, and important considerations to keep in mind to ensure successful project completion. Understanding these elements will equip you with the knowledge to navigate the complex landscape of land development financing. On this slide, we're focusing on the core objectives related to financing land development projects. First, it's crucial to understand acquisition and development financing, specifically how it applies to land acquisition, site preparation, and the necessary infrastructure. These elements are foundational because securing the right funding at this stage ensures the project can move forward smoothly. Next, we'll assess lender risk. This involves evaluating factors like the collateral involved, market demand for project, the developer's experience, and whether the loan is recourse or non-recourse. Understanding these risks helps in structuring financing that meets both the lender's and borrower's needs. Finally, we'll look at evaluating the strategy behind land development. This includes concepts like land banking, which is holding land for future development, obtaining entitlements that grant permission to develop, and creating value through various development stages. By mastering these objectives, we can approach land development financing with a comprehensive perspective that balances risk, strategy, and financial practicality. Let's dive into what land development financing is all about. Essentially, this type of financing supports a critical phase where raw land is transformed into build-ready sites. This means securing funds not just to buy the land, but also to cover the early development stages. That includes installing essential infrastructure like roads and utilities, which are necessary to make the land functional and accessible. By doing so, this financing turns raw land into valuable lots, creating usable collateral that can attract further investment or eventually support construction projects. It's a key step in turning a simple piece of land into a viable development opportunity. Here, we're looking at the land development financing cycle, which outlines how capital moves through different stages as the risk decreases and the land becomes more ready for development. It starts with acquisition, where raw or partially improved land is purchased using a combination of equity and acquisition and development financing. Next, the land goes through entitlements, where approvals, zoning, permits, and legal rights are secured to turn the concept into a feasible project. After that, site preparation takes place. This includes clearing the land, grading, managing drainage, and planning utilities to get the property ready for construction. Then comes infrastructure development, where essential improvements like roads, water, sewer, and power are installed, which greatly enhances the land's usability and value. Finally, the land reaches a sale or vertical development stage, where finished lots are either sold or developed further, allowing lenders and developers to exit the project. Throughout this process, as uncertainty decreases, the land's valuation generally becomes stronger, attracting more financing and investment. Let's talk about acquisition and development, or A&D loans. These loans are essential for moving a property from just a raw piece of land to a site that's ready for building. The first part is acquisition, which covers buying a land parcel itself and securing control of the site, basically getting ownership or the rights to the property. Then comes development, with a loan fund to use for all the groundwork, grading the land, installing utilities like water and electricity, building roads, managing drainage, and putting in place other infrastructure that's necessary before you can start building up vertically. The main goal here is to transform raw or underdeveloped land into finished lots, which not only increases the land's value, but also lowers the execution risk when construction begins. In other words, A&D loans help bridge the gap between purchasing land and having a fully prepared site ready for construction. Now, let's look at the two-phase approach typical in acquisition and development loan structures. The first phase is acquisition. Here, one facility usually funds a land purchase initially. This phase secures control of the site before any vertical development begins. It typically involves purchasing raw land or an undeveloped tract. The funding at this stage covers a portion of the land cost, but the borrower will need to contribute equity. This phase tends to be shorter, covering the time while approvals, planning, and closing conditions are being finalized. The second phase is development. After acquiring the land, additional advances are drawn as the site is prepared for its intended use. This includes site work such as grading, installing utilities, building roads, and managing drainage and other infrastructure. Funding during this phase is draw-based, meaning disbursements are made based on budgets, inspections, and hitting key milestones. This stage usually requires a longer timeline because it involves the actual work to get the lots or pads ready for market. Together, these two phases provide a structured way to finance land development projects, balancing initial acquisition costs with the ongoing expenses of preparing the site for final use. Let's talk about land acquisition, specifically its purpose and funding. The primary goal here is to secure control of the land before any entitlement, improvement, or vertical construction begins. Essentially, it's about having ownership or control early in the process to ensure the project can move forward smoothly. When it comes to lender requirements, banks want to see a few key things before they provide financing. First, they look for borrower equity, meaning the borrower should have some skin in the game financially. They also want a realistic development plan that shows the project can actually be completed successfully. Finally, evidence of market demand is crucial. Lenders need to be confident that the development will attract buyers or tenants. Regarding collateral assessment, raw land poses a challenge because it's hard to liquidate quickly if necessary. Because of this, lenders tend to underwrite very conservatively. They are often cautious and may require recourse, which means a borrower might be personally liable beyond just the land itself to reduce the lender's risk. Overall, financing land development projects involves careful evaluation to ensure control of the land is secured early and that the financial risk is managed effectively from all sides. Here, we're focusing on the core idea behind site preparation and infrastructure in land development. Essentially, improvements like roads, utilities, drainage, and grading change raw land into usable lots. This transformation is crucial because it reduces risk, makes the land more attractive to buyers, and ultimately supports a higher project value. When we talk about buildability, infrastructure plays a key role by making the site physically ready for vertical development, meaning that buildings can actually be constructed without major hurdles. This readiness directly contributes to what's called value lift, where the completed improvements increase lot pricing and give lenders more confidence in financing the project. Finally, market readiness is another important aspect. Prepared sites attract builders and buyers more quickly, which leads to faster absorption rates. So, investing in proper site preparation and infrastructure not only enhances the land's physical characteristics, but also boosts its financial and market potential. When it comes to financing land development projects, several key risks need to be carefully considered. First, there's the collateral risk. Raw land typically provides limited cash flow, and its resale value can be uncertain. This makes it harder for lenders to recover their investment if the project encounters delays or stalls. Next, market demand plays a crucial role. Even a site that's well located can underperform if there's a drop in absorption rates, pricing, or end-user interest during the development phase. Developer experience is another critical factor. Lenders pay close attention to a developer's track record, their ability to execute the project successfully, and their financial strength, because any mistakes in entitlement or construction can be very costly. Lastly, recourse exposure matters a lot. Many loans require personal or corporate guarantees, which means a borrower often assumes significant downside risk if things don't go as planned. Understanding these risks helps both lenders and developers navigate the complexities of land development financing more effectively. When we talk about the risks associated with using raw land as collateral, there are a few key challenges to keep in mind. First, raw land is often illiquid, meaning it's much harder to sell quickly, especially if the market is weak or the property is in a remote location. This can make it difficult to recover your investment if you need to sell fast. Next, title issues can pose significant problems. Unclear access rights, zoning conflicts, or existing encumbrances can all make the land unattractive or even unmarketable as collateral, posing a big risk for lenders. Finally, raw land typically doesn't generate any income. Unlike developed property, vacant land produces little to no cash flow, which means it doesn't help support loan payments if there are delays or financial difficulties. These factors together create notable collateral risks when financing land development projects. Now, let's talk about market demand and feasibility risk, which are crucial factors in land development projects. Projects often fail when expected absorption rates, pricing, or timing don't align with what actually happens in the market. For example, if demand is weaker than anticipated, sales of lots, homes, or commercial spaces will slow down significantly, impacting cash flow and project viability. Another common issue is relying on overly optimistic forecasts. If the projections are too hopeful, they can mislead stakeholders about the true feasibility of the project, leading to costly mistakes. Lenders recognize these risks and typically scrutinize comparable properties, current pipeline supply, and local market absorption rates thoroughly before approving financing. Understanding and managing these market demand factors are essential to successfully financing and completing a land development project. When it comes to financing land development projects, one of the most crucial factors lenders consider is the developer's experience and track record. Lenders prefer work with teams that have a proven history of managing key risks, such as entitlements, construction, and the eventual exit strategy. This means they look for developers who have successfully delivered similar projects on time and within budget. Additionally, the ability to efficiently handle approvals, manage contractors, and oversee infrastructure work is essential. Finally, protecting the project's value through effective leasing, lot sales, or timely disposition further builds lender confidence. Essentially, a strong developer track record significantly reduces risk and increases the likelihood of securing financing. When it comes to financing land development projects, understanding the difference between recourse and non-recourse loans is crucial. Non-recourse loans primarily rely on the land itself as collateral, which means the lender's claim is limited to the property. After default, the borrower's liability is limited, making these loans harder to obtain for raw land or early-stage developments because the risk is higher for the lender. On the other hand, recourse loans allow the lender to go after the borrower's other assets beyond the project if necessary. This provides stronger protection for the lender, especially when the collateral's value is uncertain or when market and developer risks are higher. Essentially, more protection for the lender usually translates into more liability for the borrower, so balancing these factors is key in land development financing. When it comes to interest rates and risk premiums in land development financing, lenders adjust rates based on a level of uncertainty and risk involved. As uncertainty rises, lenders add a risk premium to protect themselves. For example, raw land and early-stage projects usually carry the highest rates because they come with the greatest risk. We can think of this as a typical pricing ladder. At the bottom, when a project is stabilized, interest rates are lower, reflecting lower risk. Moving up, entitled land, which has gone through some approvals, carries a moderate risk and thus a higher rate with modest premium. Further up, during the improvement phase, the risk increases again, leading to an even higher premium. At the top, raw land represents the highest risk and commands the highest interest rates. This pricing structure reflects not just the collateral's quality, but also the visibility of demand for the finished project and the execution risks associated with bringing it to completion. Understanding this helps developers and lenders align expectations and structure financing appropriately for different project stages. When we talk about land banking, we're really discussing a strategic approach to holding land over time to maximize its value. The key idea here is to buy land early, well before the surrounding demand reaches its peak. By doing this, we position ourselves to benefit as growth, infrastructure improvements, and necessary approvals increase the development potential of the land. Next, we hold onto the land through various entitlement processes and market cycles. This patience allows us to navigate fluctuations and regulatory steps without being forced to sell prematurely. Finally, the goal is to monetize the appreciation of the land when market timing is favorable. Essentially, we sell or develop the property at a point when it can bring the highest return on investment. This whole strategy requires thoughtful financing of land development projects to ensure we can sustain holding costs and capitalize on future opportunities. Understanding these steps is crucial for successfully leveraging land banking as a strategic tool. Now, let's walk through the entitlement process, which is essentially the pathway to securing development rights for a project. First, we start with zoning approval. This step determines how the land can be used and the density allowed, so it sets a basic framework for what's possible on the site. Next comes the environmental review. Here, we assess potential impacts of the development and figure out how to mitigate any negative effects. This ensures the project complies with environmental regulations and community standards. After that, we move to permitting, where detailed plans are submitted and multiple approvals are obtained. This step solidifies the practical aspects of the project and ensures everything is up to code. Finally, once all these steps are completed, development rights are granted, confirming the land as buildable. Understanding this pathway is crucial for financing land development projects, as each stage reduces risk and adds value to the site. In this module, we're focusing on the impact of entitlements on project value. Essentially, entitlements, including permits, access rights, and utilities, transform potential uncertainty into concrete, usable rights. This transformation is crucial because it makes the land's value more tangible and predictable. Before entitlements are in place, land is often priced speculatively, which means higher risk for buyers and a more limited pool of potential investors. Once you have approved development rights, however, that risk drops significantly. The land's use becomes clearly defined, feasibility improves, and the project can attract a wider range of financing options. In summary, securing entitlements typically raises land value and can greatly enhance the viability of a development project, making it more attractive to both developers and financiers. This concept is central to understanding how to finance land development projects effectively. Here, we're looking at how infrastructure improvements directly impact property value. Before any improvements, raw land typically holds lower value because it has limited utility and fewer financing options. Without roads, utilities, or easy access, the land remains more of a speculative investment. However, once roads and utilities are added, the situation changes significantly. The land becomes more accessible and serviceable, making it ready for building and development. These improvements increase the site's feasibility and attractiveness to buyers and lenders. In other words, infrastructure transforms undeveloped land into marketable and financeable development sites. This unlocks much higher value, making the land a viable option for development projects. Essentially, investing in infrastructure is the key step to increasing property value and securing financing for land development. When we talk about a pro forma analysis in land development, we're essentially looking at whether the projected value of the developed land exceeds all the major costs involved in getting that land ready for market. The first key cost is the acquisition cost, which is simply the purchase price of the land. Next, we have development costs, including grading, the installation of utilities, and building roads. These are essential for making the land usable. Then, there are financing costs, which account for interest and fees associated with loans or other financing methods used during development. Holding costs are also important. They include property taxes and carrying costs while the land is being prepared and marketed. After accounting for all these expenses, we compare them to the projected sale value, which is the revenue expected from selling the finished lots. The difference between the projected sale value and the total cost gives us the bottom line return, which tells us whether the project is financially viable. Understanding this pro forma is crucial for financing land development projects and making informed investment decisions. Let's take a closer look at 3 common exit strategies developers use to return capital. First, selling to a developer involves selling entitled land or finished lots directly to a builder. The key advantage here is an earlier exit once approvals and infrastructure are in place, allowing for faster capital recycling, though the upside is generally lower. Next, direct development means carrying the project forward into vertical development or delivering a finished product. This approach requires a longer hold, including construction, lease-up, or absorption phases. While this strategy can offer higher margin potential, it also involves more capital at risk. Lastly, joint ventures involve contributing land and partnering with others who bring capital or operating expertise. Exits here are phased and tied to partner milestones and distributions. The benefits include shared risk and shared upside, but it comes with less direct control over project. Each of these strategies balances timeline, risk, and returns differently, so developers choose based on their goals and resources. On this slide, We're looking at the core checklist for financing land development projects, which outlines the 6 critical review areas lenders focus on before approving a loan. First, the market analysis is essential. This includes evaluating demand, absorption rates, pricing trends, and the local competitive supply to ensure there's a viable market for the project. Next, title review is crucial. Ownership must be clear, and the presence of any liens, easements, or legal access issues need to be identified and resolved. The environmental assessment comes third. It covers Phase 1 findings, any contamination risks, wetlands, and any necessary mitigation efforts, all of which can significantly impact project viability. Then, the developer's experience plays a major role. Lenders want to see a strong track record, proven execution capability, and sufficient capital strength to manage and complete the project. Zoning and entitlements form the fifth area. It's important to confirm current approvals, permitted uses, and assess any remaining entitlement risks that could delay or alter the project. Finally, financial projections are closely scrutinized. This includes reviewing costs, timing, leverage ratios, contingencies, and ensuring the exit assumptions are realistic. Together, these 6 areas form a foundation lenders use to conduct their due diligence, verifying that the site sponsor and financials all hold up before moving forward with financing. When we talk about environmental assessment and risk in land development projects, it's important to understand the 2 key phases involved. Phase 1 primarily focuses on reviewing historical records, prior land uses, and any visible environmental concerns that might indicate potential contamination. This phase helps identify whether there might be issues without invasive testing. If Phase 1 raises suspicions of contamination, Phase 2 comes into play. This involves actually testing the soil and groundwater to determine the presence and extent of any pollutants. This step is more hands-on and technical, providing concrete data on environmental conditions. Now, why does this matter? Because adverse findings from either phase can significantly impact the project timeline and costs. They can delay the closing process, increase remediation expenses, require setting aside financial reserves, or in some cases, completely halt financing. Understanding and managing these risks early is crucial for successful financing and development of the land. Let's take a closer look at the timing risks involved in land development. First, delays can stretch capital significantly. When approvals and construction take longer than expected, the interest costs pile up, which ultimately reduces the overall returns on the project. Next, markets can shift unexpectedly. Demand might weaken before the lots are ready to sell or build, which can create challenges in completing the development profitably. Lastly, holding costs tend to compound over time. Expenses like taxes, debt service, and maintenance continue to rise even though the project isn't generating revenue yet. Understanding these timing risks is crucial for effectively financing land development projects. Let's talk about the capital requirements and leverage considerations when financing land development projects. Typically, the amount of leverage or borrowed funds used is lower during the acquisition phase. This is mainly because at this stage, the land is often raw or in an early stage, carrying more risk. For example, loan-to-value ratios might be around 60% during acquisition. As the project progresses into the development phase, after site work and infrastructure improvements have been made, that risk decreases. Consequently, lenders are usually comfortable increasing leverage, sometimes up to about 75%. However, these ranges can vary quite a bit depending on factors like the specific market conditions, the quality of collateral, the status of land entitlements, and the financial strength of the project sponsor. Understanding this typical progression, from lower leverage with raw land to higher leverage once development reduces risk, is crucial when planning financing strategies for land development projects. Let's go through the key lessons learned from this case study on financing land development projects. First, securing entitlements is crucial. Value really begins to accelerate only after zoning and approvals are in place, because they significantly reduce uncertainty for all stakeholders. Next, timing matters a lot. Phasing the project to align infrastructure spending with actual buyer demand helps manage cash flow and reduce financial risk. Another important point is that a strong team makes a difference. Experienced developers and consultants can greatly improve lender confidence, which is critical for project financing. Finally, infrastructure itself creates value. Adding roads and utilities transforms raw land into lots that are both financeable and attractive to the market. These lessons show how careful planning and execution are key to successfully developing land projects. Let's review the key takeaways for financing land development projects. First, A&D loans are specifically designed to fund land acquisition, site preparation, and infrastructure development. It's important to note that raw land carries a higher risk for lenders, which often leads to stricter loan terms. The value and feasibility of a project are largely driven by entitlements and site improvements, which help reduce that risk. Finally, the success of these projects depends heavily on proper timing, the amount of leverage used, and having a clear exit strategy. Keeping these points in mind can help navigate the complexities of land development financing more effectively. To successfully develop land, it's crucial to align several key factors: capital, approvals, infrastructure, and the timing of your exit strategy. First, using acquisition and development debt is an effective way to purchase land and finance necessary improvements without tying up too much upfront capital. Next, a thorough underwriting process is essential. This means assessing the value of the collateral, understanding market demand, evaluating the strength of the project sponsor, and determining the level of recourse on the loan. Finally, creating value comes from securing entitlements, investing in infrastructure, and executing disciplined exits. By carefully managing these steps, you can maximize returns and minimize risks in land development projects.